Stef here, a relational alchemist, author and international speaker. It is my absolute honor and pleasure to be speaking to one of the 11 tenets or the 11 days of the We campaign, the We consciousness and the We collective. I have been asked and requested by the wonderful Heidi Little to perhaps provide a perspective on one of the 11 days. Now, me being me, it's very difficult just to choose one. So I've decided to provide a perspective and provide some insight on the wonderful work the people at We are already doing on 4 of the 11 days, or the 11 principles, 11 tenets, so to speak. And I'd love to speak to unity, environment, women and freedom. And 4 areas that I'm deeply inspired by and passionate about speaking to. Of course, taking action, being proactive as an activist per se, speaking on behalf of these tenets in various aspects and various forms. Again, I'm so deeply humbled to even have this opportunity to share my thoughts and experiences with you, whoever is watching, and of course, honored that Heidi has requested that I even give some thought to this. So let us begin with unity. And pardon my voice, sorry, so I've just been losing my voice, just coming back the last few days. So unity, we must begin to focus on our own commonality, on what we share, on the values that we share, on the interests that we share, on who we are, rather than focusing on our differences. If we continue to focus on our differences, all this does is propagate violence, discrimination, disconnection, dissonance amongst communities, nations, peoples. So much division comes from focusing on why or how we are different. The reality is we are so alike as human beings, but beyond that as sentient beings. And I'll speak to Earth in a moment and how unity ties so deeply in with the way we treat our Earth, the way we treat our natural environment, and how this symbolizes the division that is taking place systemically and collectively in our society. And all it is doing is distancing us from our potential as individuals and as a collective. You see, what we must understand is that when we unify, we become deeply empowered. We fall into this equilibrium, this alignment of sharing our abilities, sharing our wisdom. The ancient tribes knew this. And I'll elaborate more on this when we come to environment and sustainability. But so many of the nomadic tribes, ancient peoples, people of the earth, indigenous tribes of this world today, which are fading out so much, so quickly. Their languages, their customs, their culture, their innate wisdom and their connection to earth. And through our own, not so much technologies, but the way that we are using technology, we are distancing ourselves from earth. We are distancing ourselves from each other. And on technology, and yes, I'm filming on a camera, I'm filming on a digital device, a mobile digital device, and technology has its purpose. It has such intrinsic great value. But how are we using what we have access to? How are we using our wisdom? You see, every time we segregate, every time we feel so different to another, we are creating reasons for aberrance. We are creating reasons. We are justifying in our own being, in our own minds, in our own psyche, collective and individual, reasons, justifications to cause harm. We are creating opportunity, greater opportunity for division and segregation. We are socialized relational beings. Our success is predicated. Our success as a species, which means our survival, but not only our survival, our thriving as a species is predicated on being relational and adhering to that. This is biological and it's sociological. If we go back hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years, when we were hunter-gatherers, when we were in tribes, when we began to develop as humanoids, we realized that if we were of service to those that were in our very small groups, our chances for survival were enhanced. The moment we decided to divide was the moment that we placed great risk at our lives. So this is something that is somewhat hardwired within us. It is neurologically inbuilt within us. But beyond that, we are social, relational beings. We thrive when we are collaborative, when we are cohesive, when we share beautiful space. Beautiful space meaning that our values are aligned, or that we are able to observe who we are, how we behave, and be respectful and in reverence of those that are in our lives. We must begin to encourage healing. We must begin to reconcile our apparent or perceived differences. Healing from the damage done over thousands of years, the oppressions that have occurred over thousands of years. When we unify, we strengthen. Now, we've spoken a little bit to environment. So let me continue with the next day or the next tenet. And let me speak to, please, environment. And we need to begin to recognize what the carrying capacity of our earth is. The reality is that whatever we experience in life can only, from a physical vantage point, and we are bound by this physical world, can only be enhanced or enriched or even experienced at a base level through the integrity of our environment. It sustains our life. If our cultural, socioeconomic, geopolitical practices are misaligned, in other words, if they are causing harm whilst satisfying a material urge or a material appetite, materialistic appetite, at what expense? Now, this isn't about being against owning material possessions, or ownership is another conversation altogether. But this isn't about what we are doing, it's how we are doing it. We must find equitable means to begin to respect the intrinsic value of our earth by extracting resources, distributing resources, looking at our major industries in the world, looking at oil and gas or the petroleum-based industry, petrochemical industry, looking at the pharmaceutical industry, looking at transport industry, looking at agribusiness, looking at these major industries that are causing upheaval in our ecosystems. Now, not to get too much into the science about this, because this isn't the forum for it per se, but we have an opportunity to innovate and leverage technology to our advantage. We can begin to use technology and innovation, forward thinking and collaborative, inclusive thinking to not only satisfy our needs as a humanity, but to also consider all the other sentient beings and species on this earth, but also Earth itself. Now, if we nurture Earth, we are essentially nurturing the next generations. We are nurturing our future. And that takes me to speak to, this is a short video, it's not too long. That takes me to speak next to women. The way we treat our earth is really a byproduct of the way we treat women. And this links into the unity, this links into the discrimination that we hold as a patriarchal society, a dominant patriarchal society, an extreme expression of the human contrast or human behavior. I spend a great deal of time, attention, energy, and intention focusing on relationships. Relationships to ourselves, relationships to other people, relationships to ideas, ideologies, belief systems, doctrine, relationship to things, relationships to our intimate partners and lovers, relationships to constructs. The way we treat women has been we as a collective society. In Western culture, it's more systemic, it's more covert. Through our policy, through our geopolitical frameworks, through our cultural practices, through our views, through media, and in certain areas or cultures in the world, it's more overt. What is more dangerous? Systemic oppression, the continual systemic oppression that is difficult to gauge because it lurks in the shadows, or the overt oppression? Both are toxic, because what happens is certain sects of society are thinking they are remaining in power, but what they are actually doing is not only oppressing others, where we are then being non-unified in our expression. And we're focusing on difference, and that because we value as a society materialism, physicality, strength, dominance, we begin to play these out in our relationships, in our communities, in our interpersonal relationships. But beyond that, we begin to observe as a society that we are causing great damage to ourselves, those that are oppressing systemically or overtly, and those that are being oppressed. And this division continues. The gap becomes larger and larger. So we must recognize the intrinsic value of Earth as we recognize the intrinsic value of our women. We must revere, respect women in our society for the innate wisdom that they bring, for the way they complement men and men complement women. And then together, as human beings, we may be able to complement Earth. We must cease to move in the direction of the status quo. As men, we have caused and specifically Caucasian men, middle class to upper class, middle-aged men, who are the dominant cultural type, although if we look at the statistics, from a quantitative perspective, we are not. We are causing disharmony and disconnection. It is not serving us. It is also oppressing and repressing something deep within us. And when we do not express that, we become fractured and fragmented. We become polarized in our views and our actions. This causes disharmony for us as men as well. There are no winners in this game. The importance of bringing these topics to light is so crucial for our moving forward. Now we are at a time where we cannot risk holding back on being completely honest and completely truthful with ourselves and with those in our lives. We have an opportunity to create equity in our society. We have an opportunity to recognize our own sovereign being and how that interlinks with every other being, the connectedness that actually exists in the web of life. If you tug on one end of the web, the ripple effect is felt everywhere. We have to begin to think differently, to view our lives and people differently. We have to begin to relate to ideas differently. And that leads me to freedom. The freedom to have voice, the freedom to be included, the freedom to have access to resources, the freedom to cease discrimination, because discrimination is oppressive. Having 2+ billion people in poverty is not a natural byproduct of a well-functioning socioeconomic model. We have to begin to look at what freedom really means and redefine it. We need to do that as men, as women, as a unified whole, as children, as elderly, doesn't matter who you are, as conscious beings. These labels, yes, we use labels to compartmentalize, and our memory, our implicit and explicit memory functions in a particular way, our cognizance functions in a particular way to sift through information, sure, because millions of bits of information are coming through to us per second. But it's the emotional attachment we have on these labels and how we use them or leverage them in a toxic way to empower ourselves and disempower others. This needs to cease. I've created multiple models around sovereign leadership, how to lead self through life with great efficacy, around authentic self. So the authentic self model has 14 key principles or tenets, and it really allows an individual to be self, but also be deeply inclusive in their actions. I have a harmonious balance model as well that teaches us how to recognize the balance in our lives and cease being polarized in our actions. And importantly, with respect to women, I have a conscious warrior framework, which is very much for men. And it teaches men how to humble to women. It teaches men how to be a man in today's world. It redefines masculinity and it redefines manhood. Because when we begin to do that, we view the world different because we view ourselves differently. Everything around us begins to transmute, including old archaic beliefs that no longer have a place in today's society. I'll leave it at that because it's meant to be a short video, and I thank you so much for your time. This is just a little bit of a, excuse me, a little bit of an insight into how we can begin to make some real transmutations in our world. Of course, following the We project and the We consciousness model, and of course the 11 days or the 11 tenets as well, because these are so important in bringing awareness, rising to consciousness, making aware these themes that are crucial to our growth and expansion, our conscious expansion as human beings. Sociologically, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, physically. I want to thank you so much for your time. To find out a little bit more about me, of course, you can go to my website, stefsifandos.com. And many blessings on your journey, and whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope to, of course, meet you someday. Thank you.